started recording. Okay, so we just right about to start. So hi guys again. I'm really sorry that I had to move the workshop to another day. And perhaps you already noticed that the time has been changed for, let's say, if you live outside of EU, let's say you have like uh, right now it's 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. if you're in Georgia, for example. That's because the Europe now has the summer time shift. So that's why the time is quite different for you. Well, maybe it's not quite convenient for others. So that's why I want to encourage you, let you know in case if you see that's the current time is not convenient for you, so that's why we will try like to align the rest. At least we're right now we're having like two workshops left. One is for today and second one coming next week. We could align it. So I hope it will be useful for anyone. Great. That's announcements number one. Regarding another request. So for now, I haven't seen any messages regarding that students are lack of mentors, but still, if you got some problems with your mentor, let's say, hey, it's you're not able to reach him, or he decided like to leave the course just because he has not enough time to accomplish the mentoring. So also please don't be silent and let us know accordingly. Okay then. So one more thing I just wanted to show you. Uh, well, I'm not sure how is it will be fair for anyone, but since this course is participated by the majority of Russian speakers, um, I could leave the link. Perhaps you already know it, but here's the recent playlist with all the task reviews plus some workshops that were also conducted by me, but we were writing another application. So I could leave the link. Uh, well, let's say here. Well, I don't see any of the uh materials. Okay, maybe let's leave it in the announcement of the recent run. Okay, I will leave it right here. I know that's the praised an English-speaking audience also as well. That's why we intended doing so. And unfortunately, for the latest course run, um, well, since I wasn't conducting any of the tasks review, well, we have only one, and I'm not sure where the rest ones. Um, I just want to share it with wanted to share it with you, just not to conduct it one more time, but uh, I will share just what I have. Okay, so that's was a quite quick intro. Before we proceed, are there any questions from your end regarding the topics that we've covered this week or regarding the course organization? So please let me know what we can discuss before we move on. Okay, looks like no. Uh, just in case if you want to ask me something, just feel free to unmute to speak with me. That will be highly appreciated. In case if you're too shy, well, you can leave your question in the chat, and I will address it as soon as I will notice it. Okay, then. So let's move forward. I I have a plan like to have today's webinar in two ways. So first, I just keep some of the tabs with the recent task pushed from several of the students. We could briefly review. Well, preliminary, I took a look at it so that we could review it once again to see what's how it's accommodated, what can we notice here. And secondly, we'll proceed with our regular workshop, and I prepare some of the ideas on how can we improve our momentum application, how can we bring extra features using those mechanisms, so those features that you will learn this week. Okay, so in terms of well, actually, that's not the recent one, so you accomplished it at the end of the previous week. But just want to highlight a couple of things. Well, let's maybe go one by one. I remember something I was like reviewing previously. Okay, so the first pull request and first things I just noticed is that um, in the same level of the app folder, I see the folder called modules. Sorry, models. Well, that doesn't make much sense having here. And if you perhaps noticed this structure of my application, um, so not sure how is it visible, but oh, I got the comment last time that it's better to stick with the dark theme of EDE. So let's proceed in the following way. Uh, so in terms of project structure, in the same level of the app folder, I have the folders that represent modules. So it's core, shared, obviously, welcome, and greeting. All of this, so core and shared module, well, it's the obvious one. Greetings and welcome is it's the feature modules. So I have no other directories apart from modules. So that's why in such case, so let's see, it's the model that represents search details. So in that case, I would rather keep it in YouTube module if it's used only there, or if it's something that is shared, I would also keep it in the shared module. So let's just memorize which types of modules we have. So we have core module, which is designed for mostly for having some infrastructure services, logic, as well as the only components that are used for the core layout. For instance, in my application, I have only header and footer. So exactly that components are used for implementing the core layout. Uh, and also core module could consist of models that are also used for infrastructure. What does it mean? It means in case if you have some technical stuff like HTTP responses, or I don't know, you implemented your own logic and you want to keep some technical details somewhere or in modules or constants, so core module could be the best candidate. And another thing is shared module. So it's used for sharing pipes, directives, some shared components, as well as models. But which ones? We also move them to the core one. So shared module could consist of such models that represent business entities. By that I mean, so you now implementing the YouTube client application. So this is something that is related to this particular domain. And search details model is right another candidate to be moved to the shared model. In case if you obviously have some other models that some other parts of application or feature models that also use this entity as well. Um, so here is okay. Then in terms of project structure, here I see, well, for some reason, the directive and components are stored together. Well, I mentioned that there is no wrong project structure of the it depends without taking into account each of the technology. I'm just trying like to propose the better solution how it could be organized. So if you would keep any building blocks, group them by a separate directory, so perhaps that would be easier to navigate among them. Okay, if the component or service is used in more than one module, it automatically goes in the shared module. Yes, exactly. With the following remark is that if you remember from the lectures, if you want to export components or service, you use different approaches. So for example, our core module. So here we have a bunch of components that are used for core layout. And if we import this module, if we want to make such components visible, then we include them to the export section, right? In case if we want to create a shared service, uh, it's we can just use provided in root, so that it will be enabled globally. Just to memorize, that's the core module. If you want to create a shared service, the best place you can place it is the core module. Since core module is mostly about services and infrastructure. And if you want to create a shared component, so shared module is the best candidate. So as for here, well, I believe that would be great, like to review the project structure that I have on Angular Momentum, since it's quite a good reference how it could be organized, just not to stop to um, for too long. Then when I was looking at the pull requests, I noticed that in most of places I see ng on changes that is used for initialization, even though the component has input binding or it hasn't at all. So just to review the lifecycle hooks for initialization. Well, I'm just like uh, try to find some picture or some representation of just to show you. Okay, so well, that's just a reference of the sequence of components lifecycle hook, or not only components, directives as well. So here we see that apart from constructor and ng changes, we also have ng on init. So what's the main difference? Both constructor and ng on init run only once when the component or directive has been initialized. And you see ng on changes is also participates in initialization. So it calls whenever Angular resolved all input bindings. So okay, yeah, the code will work perfectly fine. However, in terms of code style, or best practice, I would say, it's worth making one-time logic within ng on init lifecycle hook. So that's uh, just to put it simply, whenever I see ng on changes lifecycle hook, I automatically think about a piece of logic that will be run each time whenever I change the input binding, or that will be a signal for me that I will rely on input binding changes, and it could be changed on the fly. In case if you don't expect such logic, if you don't expect that the input byte will be changed on the fly, or you just want to set the data only once, then I would encourage you using ng on init instead. So that's not only about the implementing the logic properly, it's also about the code style. Because when I see John changes, I automatically presume that something could be changed whenever I'm working with that component. So if you have one-time logic, so I would encourage you using ng on init. Well, here perhaps, well, just to briefly look at the code. So yeah, I also are seeing like some groups of properties that are declared within the component. So I'm not sure for which purpose each of the properties are separated here, but for me that doesn't make much sense. Um, Not sure if I did it as well. Perhaps yes. Okay, just I'm trying to find some other reference, so perhaps we can find something here. Okay, so looks like I don't have, here. I have a group of properties, like separated by the breaking space. So it makes sense in the following thing. Not just to break down the variables like this, right? So we can do the following. So here is a quick tip. How to define the groups for properties. First group is everything that starts with at, with decorator. Input, output, view, child, or content, children, so on and so forth. That will be the first group. And it also will be great if we can move this group at the top. Why so? We will see like actually, we'll see actual interface of that component. So just to put it another way. By that I mean the input and output parameters that's the component depends on. So it depends on input byte, but also it could get something in return, right? Uh, Whenever I see it at the top, I already have the idea of the type of this component. Either it's a wrapper, this is the smart component, or it's just for representation. I will see it from the first lines of my component class. So that will be the first group. And the second one is the rest. We can also like separate a bit here. In production I usually do the following thing. So first group is public constants, then public variables. Well, that's just how I name it. Then it could be some private constants. Let's say private read only. I usually do this. For example, so this is private constants and private variables. So I usually put everything private to the bottom, because it doesn't participate in forming the layout. The template will not uh, able to access the private property and methods. So that's why I put everything to the bottom. So here, I believe you got the idea. And we have such groups. And you can group it in the following way. So, but try not to overwork with it, just because here your component class will look a bit wider without making any sense. Okay. Okay, so what else I noticed? I will just like try to memorize here and will stop by whatever I wanted to highlight you. Um, okay. So here about groups already covered. Um, one more thing for one more recommendation for you. Perhaps I already noticed that is trying to keep the logic as simple as it possible. Ideally, in ideal world, it will be something like the following, right? So, well, that's perhaps not the best example. So let me just find something in my own code. Perhaps I could find something. Uh, mhm, not really. It's greeting, maybe welcome. Let's see if I have something here. Um, well, not here. Maybe if I will find something in the code, so I could uh, help with it here. I'm just trying to find an example I seen recently in repositories. Maybe not here. Um, okay. Perhaps that's could be an example. Uh, I would simplify a bit the logic. By what I mean that here I see that the pipe is implemented, but for me it's will be quite difficult to get into the logic. What is supposed to be here? Um, what I would do here is to um, split up these methods into the smaller ones. I would create some complementary private methods and leave the transform method in such a way so that it will consist only of sequence of invoking private methods. That's in ideal world. And if you would also like tend to having the entry point as simple as it possible, so then your code will be easy to maintain, to read, and to get into in case if you are new to your application. Well, let's say if you invite some colleague to participate in your project, for him it will be a really easier to get into what's happening here. Okay, also here, I see a bunch of methods that's also like quite uh quite tough also to get into. So I see here some of the events like are emitting date sorting, view count sorting. Uh, that's invocation, that's event emitter, repeat several times. So that's it would be great like to move it to a separate method. This one could be, so here I got the idea is about like toggling the direction of the sorting. it also could be separated. It's the same logic, right? So ideally, one of these methods will look like invocation of three private methods that will also be reused. And okay, and when I refactor this a bit, I will see, okay, whenever I click on date sorting, right, I will expect having this, and this. I will toggle the direction. I will set up the local variable. Okay, that could be left as this. Here I see the invocation of two methods in that case. Toggle the direction of sorting and then emit sorting events. And in that case, on sort date will be 3 lines of code, which could be much easier to read. So that was my idea of showing you how the methods could look like. Try to keep it as simple as possible. Okay, here I see it's not like, yes, because it's not about the models. I've seen models in the previous task, but not here. Well, anyway, I just highlighted for you in just to ensure we're on the same page. Okay, components, directives, pipes, mocked models. Okay, pretty okay with the structure. So it's quite good, and perhaps nothing nothing special I noticed there. Okay, but isn't this? Mm, they descending. Uh, okay. Here maybe instead of having two separate icons, I would have only one. And font icon is something that could be an input binding, a property binding. And here we can pass an expression that will return as either our arrow up or our arrow down. That's yeah, that's a small thing, actually. So in terms of sorting, here also, it could be only one invocation. Either it's descending or ascending, it will influence only the last condition. Instead of subtracting the time from A subtracted by B, we could change only one condition here instead of like having more or less the same. So also like by separating your logic into steps by creating additional methods could also help you to make the logic more or less reusable. Um, well, actually nothing extra special with the components, directives, and pipes task. I noticed just a quite small recommendations for you. Okay, and with the rest ones, I believe you already got the comments from your mentors. In case if not, you see it's not quite sufficient for you. Um, please let me know accordingly. You can ping me in private. Um, so that I could revisit some of the parts, or if you want like to have some sort of feedback separately. So please let me know. I will like revisit your pull request. And one more thing, if you want your pull request of the recent work to be reviewed on the next workshop, so you can send me links as well or request me to do so. But okay, uh, that's just a quick um it's a quick review of what I noticed whenever I was like reviewing a bunch of your code. Um, perhaps we could move further. Actually, we have plenty of things to do. So, first of all, one of the tabs has been opened automatically. So this thing is will be used in our today's example. So just to revisit what we're working on. So last time we restructured our application into several modules. We implemented a bunch of the services, as well as we implemented routing for showing two pages. So first one is welcome page with the input that prompt us to enter the name. And whenever we enter the name, we appear on the following screen. And whenever we get refresh the page, so it will show us the same screen because we saved our name in the local storage. And also we could add some bunch of to-do items right here, just to mark our main focus for today. As you might be noticed, behind the scenes, I've added like header and footer, just not to have a simple message that header and footer works, to make it more prettier. Um, and a bunch of things I just wanted to highlight. So actually not great changes I introduced here. I haven't committed it yet. So first of all, I added one more material module to work with the toolbar. I added here, both for header and footer. And the only thing I wanted to highlight here is that in order to make router link directive work, I had to add router module to the core module. So in the other modules, you will have this router module by default. In the app module, it is used for configuring the listing of feature modules and configuring lazy loading. For the rest ones, it will simply take us to the components. So any other modules will also have the routing module, except maybe shared module. In case if you need something here, perhaps you also need to include a router module here as well. Without for root and for child, we just need the directive from that module. And that's it. I've just made some changes behind the scenes. Okay, so today's focus will be forms, HTTP, and RxJS. Well, first important thing, since the lecture recordings were conducted when it was, I don't quite remember, Angular 11 or 12 or something like that, but starting from Angular 14, if I'm not mistaken, there some of the useful features appeared in terms of reactive forms. It is called typed forms. So what does it mean? So right now, whenever you create controls using reactive of using classes or services for building reactive forms, if you pass some value, it will automatically assign it for a type, right? And also all these classes support generic to specify explicitly the type of the value that could be passed to this particular form control. And it's also applicable for form groups and form arrays as well. So here in this example of documentation, we see that form group if we don't specify anything in generic, it will accept the following object where both properties are strings, just because they take the value from the primitive we passed as the initial value. So That's I could like leave the link for you. Um, because by default, the type forms will be used. Uh, Not sure whether you tried to update your Angular application from older versions to Angular 14, but if you do so, by default, the Angular updater will transform all your forms to the classes that's called untyped form group or untyped form control. You could still keep with this approach in case if you experience some issues with using typed form group and form control, but I would highly encourage you started using typed forms. So perhaps that will be our first thing to get started. Well, in our task, in our application, actually, we do not have such complex forms, but just in case we could implement this as well. Okay, things got interesting. So, well, here we have just one input. So perhaps we could stick just with the to-do list. It's located in greeting module. So in order to start using the reactive forms, we will need the reactive forms module. You just noticed that I removed forms module just because it's not needed here since I'm going to use reactive forms. And here we need to substitute this two-way binding with our new approach. That's actually quite easy. Um, so, um, since my form consists only of one input, perhaps I could just create one form control. In your cases, it could be also the solution, just to create form control like this. So now, because we don't pass any of the initial values here, it states that it could accept any. Okay, so in case if I add empty string here, so now it states as that the value could consist of string form control state. Okay, so in case if you have the same simple form, you can use just form control. But if you want to support more than one field and have some sort of validation that could be useful, it could based on other inputs. So in that case, we will need the form group. There are several ways how can we do that. First is to create the form group right here and start listing all the controls right here and so on and so forth. Or another thing is to use form builder, which is the most preferable way we can do that. For such purpose, I will also add on init lifecycle hook. Okay. Let's do the following. I will create a form group. With the following value, right? So, it's because it accepts. Okay, so in that case, let's see the generic. It accepts the um, abstract controller, form controller, any other group, nested group. So seems like we will require the typing only for the controls. So let's do the following. Then we want to create a new form group by invoking form builder. So be this fb.group. And here we specify the listing of controls. If you don't have anything to pass here, you want just to create an empty form control, you can just pass. It accepts two types of data. First, you can just specify the initial value just by passing the value here, or if you have something extra, then you need to pass an array, and here you specify the initial value. Then the next argument, if we refer here, so it's options. So the next will be synchronous validator. In case if it's one, we can just do this the following without invoking it at all. So second is actually the listing of the synchronous validators. Just for your reference, I will show you in more. Say I will show you from here. I'll just try finding some examples just to refer it later on. So we could just create the controls. Okay, I'm just trying to memorize where I have found a perfect example. Looks like not here. Just for you to keep it as material. So here, as I showed you, we could create the form group easily by passing a regular object. So here we do not have any validators. We just have the empty form, empty controls. And here, as I already shown you, we can keep the single validator without wrapping it with the array like this, in case if you have only one validator to be applied. In case if you have several, then we enclose it in the array. And here we can apply something extra. There are like a couple of pre-built validators. You could refer in the documentation, or my IDE supports like jumping into typings. And here I can see all the available patterns out of the box. Right. We can use a required validator, and then validators max lengths. Right. So will be 50. Okay, just for your reference, I will leave this link as well. Maybe I will do even better on the older examples. it here. That should be enough for our particular example. Let's see if we have something here as well. So in case if you need to create a nested group, we can do that again by using form builder as well. Um, uh, Also, if you need to create a form array, it's also possible with form builder. So here I didn't find an example. I wanted just to show you. So here we applied the validators for the particular control. In case if you want to apply a validator for the entire form group, for example, you want to create um, the custom validator that will check several inputs. So perhaps that's the best place. You can place your custom validators here. By the way, so what's the validator function is? Uh, in case if you want to create something custom, it's easy to do. So validation function is a simple function that will return either validation error object. It's a simple key value map. The key is the type of error occurred, and the value is could be any value actually. So it's well any non-falsy values. So if we return something like the following from here, uh, so in that case, it will mark our form as not valid because instead of null we return the object. And this key is an indicator which exact error is occurred. And for example, if you want to check whether you have this or that particular error, you can refer to the form by other accessing errors. And here, if our error presents, you can do some extra logic, or you can invoke has error and pass the error code. And let's say if your form has this exact error, so in that case, you could do anything. Just maybe you can show also the particular error message to highlight the user that this particular error occurred. So I will just comment it for you, or I will simply do the following. And now, let's say, so first maybe let's finalize our form. I will just show you some extra things. So we created the form group that into the submit to do, we need to do another thing. So instead of the title, we want to read our value. That will be in the following way. And now we need to bind our HTML form to start listening to our form group. To do so, we need the input binding called form group. Here we pass the reference to our form group, and then we need bind all the inputs with our form controls. If you don't need to pass the instance to it, you can simply pass the control name. Control value dot name. Okay, and that should be enough. Perhaps I didn't supposed to remove the forms module. I just don't want uh, to rewrite the logic regarding the checkbox. It relies on a G model. Okay, but now let's see what we have here. The type undefined is not assigned to the type group. That's just because I marked it as optional in my class declaration. Now it should be fine. And then let's see what we have. As you can already mentioned, I have the initial value passed here. That's great. Whenever I submit, it's not get reset. But that's not a big deal. First, new to-do item is not needed anymore. So now we need somehow to reset our form to the initial state. Okay, we can do it. We can do it with reset. Let's see what we'll have here. Okay, so it's reset. It simply just puts the empty value here. And if you've noticed, my Angular material component starts reacting to the validation error. So now if my input is empty, one of the validation rules is failing, which means that this field marked as required, and that's why Angular material puts appropriate styles to mark this input as invalid. How is it actually possible? So if you work with forms, Angular will put some of the classes automatically so that you could use these classes to make use of it by applying appropriate styles. So if you see some of the classes are applied, so then you most likely want to apply some highlight effects here. For example, we see invalid class. So this is not the Angular material one. This is the default Angular class, along with ngPristine and ngTouched. So what does it mean? So by default, our input along with the form, you'll also see such classes in the entire form, right? So by default, each form and control has ngUntouched, ngPristine, and ng, depending on whether you have or not have validation rules. And then, so by default, it's pristine and untouched. Whenever we focused and then blurred, and counts as touched. Pristine means that we haven't typed anything here, but whenever we start typing it, it's marked as dirty. Even though if we removed the value from here, it's still dirty because we already typed something here. So it could be extremely useful if you want to customize your behavior of the component that represents your input form. So right now I see that it fails validation rules. And also we have another one that clamped our max length to 50. But we see even though our form is not valid, still we can submit it, which is not quite good. So that's why we can do the following. So we can either refer to the valid. This is the property that indicates whether the form is valid or not. And then it will prevent us from submitting in case if it fails validation. So that's exactly what we're trying to achieve. And now we also need to display some error messages to indicate our users that something goes wrong. So how can we achieve it? So if I'm not mistaken, there is the special component that could uh, help us making error messages, and this component is mat error. Okay, so in the example, we see that it refers whether this invalid or not. But since we have multiple validators and we need to let user know that exactly this validation failed, so we will do the following way. So form, then somehow we need to refer to that control. That's control called name has error, and the error code is required. That's one of the ways how can we do that. But just to show you the capabilities and why we need such error codes at all, we will do the following. The value is required. Property name comes from the index signature, so it must be accessed as the dynamic value. We either can refer it to form controls or form controls get. That doesn't really matter. So now we see exactly the error that is occurred in our form. So the value is required. And now whenever we start typing and another validation has failed, we don't see anything. Okay, let's see what goes wrong. It should be max length. Um, Maybe it has some other error code. I can, well, debug it, but we could refer to the documentation easily to see, okay, it's max length, but what is the error code? Or maybe I am wrong. Validation message for my max length attribute. So here, trolls touched has error max length, but why it's not showing up? Okay, now perhaps I got it. Length. The letter L should not be uppercase. So now we got the desired result, and now it states that the value is too long. Okay, perfect. And for such purpose, we need different error codes. And perhaps you'll also encounter such things like the suggestions for making a password stronger, like 8 characters minimum, or special signs should be included, or digits should be also in place. So that's the perfect example where you need different error codes, and perhaps you will also need custom validators to be implemented. Um, so just one more thing. Whenever you encounter the form task, I remember that there is like the criteria for having some sort of suggestions. Um, I would recommend separating other different criteria, separate them by creating multiple validators. One validator per each item. That should be great. Okay, before moving on to other things, are there any other questions to the forms part? Since like we're already like 1 hour's passed and we have some other things to accomplish. So please let me know if you want to know more in terms of forms. We could try to implement something else. Okay, then looks like we can move forward. So we have implemented the reactive forms approach to our input, including validation. That's really great. We can move forward. So as for the schedule, yes, uh, you also like covered the RxJS topic. Uh, Honestly, yeah, RxJS, I know it's two-way complicated just because it has lots of operators, like for mapping, for switch mapping, way lots of them. And um, you'll get more experienced whenever you encounter it in the real life scenarios. Just give it a time, and you will gain more experience in knowing RxJS operators. But right now, since we have some to-do comment left from the previous webinar, so why don't we create the service for the to-do items and create some sort of state management that will build using RxJS. Okay, so for such purpose, we'll need to create a service that will be in greeting, since it's related only to that particular area. So we created the to-do service. Um, here we go. Here is our service. Um, so we want to refer to our greeting module, since the service will be intended to use only within this module. Then we want to have our state with to-dos, and the best way we can organize it is subject. If you remember, there are several subjects that are existing. So it's a regular subject, uh, this behavior subject, replay, and async. So with the async subject, it's used like to throw the value whenever it's complete. So it's not quite suitable in our case. Replace subject is also great. And whenever you subscribe to it, you will result in having all the values that were pushed previously to the replace object. Since we don't want having all these values pushed, but we want to see only the last one, perhaps we want to have behavior subject. By the way, behavior subject is simplified version of replace subject with such a fact that it accepts the uh, initial state as the required parameter. As for the regular subject, well, it will emit a value pushed to the subject whenever it has subscription. So just to visualize it somehow, so let's assume the following situation. We pushed uh, some values here, and then we will subscribe to it, to which it will lead. Our subscription will not be emitted because we subscribed it afterwards. Then, if we will push other values like 4, 5, and 6, our subscription will be perfectly fine and it will invoke the inner function and thus value will be passed. If something will be subscribed afterwards, it will be also empty just because we pushed the values before we subscribe to it. And we want to take the latest state of the subject. And that's why our choice is behavior subject. So let's use it for our purpose. By the way, to mark the property that we accept the observable, we can use the $sign. And as you see, it has like the required argument, which will represent the initial state of it. So let's move forward to our to-do list. So to-do items, it will be our initial thing. And if we pass value here, you might be observed that it automatically applies the appropriate type to it, so we do not even need the generic. So that's okay. And we also need one more method for adding to-dos. So we can move the logic right to the service. We'll accept a new name to the to-do model, and then it will be the same as we've seen it in the component. Okay, so the ID refers to the lengths. So okay, we can do something else. The ID of it. Let's find some random ID generator in JavaScript, just not to rewrite it. UUID, so it's the third-party dependencies. We do not need it. We can do the following. So and just paste the random thing from Stack Overflow just to save our time. And just generate the ID. So it accepts string. So why don't we do that? Aha. It accepts the number, but not the string. Well, why don't we do the following? Or maybe we can switch to string. Why not? So it already accepts the string. The only thing perhaps we need to slightly modify our mockup title. The new title will be here. Status to do, completed false. Great. I would say, why don't we have completed as optional? I would propose to do such thing. Let's remove the completed boolean from our data just to store the status as the string. If you remember last time, we did like the following. The status is the type alias for strings, which is a good alternative to constants or to enums. What if we do like the following? So here we created our new to-do, then we need to notify that we have done the new value. Okay, so looks like we still need to store the array. To the following. Then what can we do here? Perhaps we can update the to-dos, and then we will notify the subscribers that we have the new array coming in, and it will push it right here. So now why I have removed the status from here, it's just because I want to do the following thing. I want to return this stream and to transform it. I'll use map operator just as an example. So map is the same map as we have in arrays. So it will simply pass the value over, and it will return whatever we returns inside the map operator. So it will do like the following: to-dos map. I want to return everything as is, with the exception of the boolean. If the status is not completed, then the to-do is considered as not complete. Oh, sorry. Let's do the following thing. So I just slightly transformed my stream by adding extra data, or I can, in return, I could get another data and it will be passed over. So now I believe we are ready. Like, let's maybe instead of having this GAD generator, that it doesn't make much sense of it. Let's return everything as it was, just because we transformed the logic a bit. Now, items length, title. So now instead of doing this, I'll require my service. I will inject it right away. And then we'll add to do right here. And then it brings the component much more simpler and easier to read because I accumulated the logic for creation of the to-do inside my to-do service. Okay, then we need to subscribe to our box, our to-do items, and we can do the following. So we can use by just simply getting our to-dos right here. And now, since we're dealing with observable, the most convenient way, how can we do that, is to use async 5. If you remember from the last times, so app task completed, and it's boolean undefined. Okay. And this directive accepts only boolean. So okay. Oh, we can do can slightly modify it. Okay, let's see. We have an error. Cannot access greeting module before initialization, so it's relative to the service. Well, actually, the majority of the time, I use provided in just for specifying root, uh, and not specifying the actual module. Because it accepts some predefined values right here, I will do the following. Still, we will lack the tree shaking mechanism. It could be also the choice that we will have provider section for listing local services. But still, if we want to see entry module, we can do that, but for some reason, it doesn't allow me to do so. And I have zero idea for now. Because I specified provided being as the module. And it's the most preferable way, as I told you last time, but still, the example about show is the preferable way, but still, it's not working. Well, I usually in the production use to use the provider section to list local modules, but let's find out together since I haven't encountered it previously. So that's something that is quite different. So import user module service elsewhere. Specify solution private. If you don't want to set the application, unless import the user module, you've created the can specify the service should be provided in the module. Okay, that's maybe because we have the server not in the directory above, but instead we have in the greetings module. So since we have created the service locally, perhaps we could still stick to provider section just because here we ensure that it's in the feature module and it will be used only there. So that could be an option. But if we create it elsewhere, well, perhaps that will be a good thing to revisit. I will also do that. So, but if you can manage it earlier, so I would like ask you to let me know. Okay, then. So here we see that we successfully loaded all our previous to-dos, but now it's done from our service. So here now, if we add one more to do, we see in what it will result. Okay, so we see the updated to do, but now we, instead of updating the statuses, you see what's happening, right? So we do not listen for the statuses. So that's why we will need some toggler. We will need some toggler to be added to our okay, that's another candidate to be moved here. So let's do that right away. I usually do like the following. So if you're familiar with state management already, so perhaps you know that if you want to keep the state immutable, so it will happen in the following way. I'll create a new array with map, and then just remap the things onto the following. So status completed will be like something like the following. So we're toggling it. So it will be either false or true. So we will do the following. Just inverse it, and then status will be depending on whether it's completed or not. Let's see. Well, honestly, now I don't see that's actually the string status means a lot. And now we see, yeah, we have repeated logic. So that's the great candidate to be moved to another methods instead of repeating it. So now it will toggle all items. To do if the ID is the same as we provided, then we will map this object to something else. Okay, and now let's toggle it. We can still instead pass value. The boolean is not aha, I got this. So instead we can pass checked. And then by clicking on it, and instead of ID, maybe it will be better to pass the full object, just not to decompose it. Mm-hmm. Oh, anyway. And then we will pass the object all at once and now see whether it works. Okay, so now we don't have this pretty animation, but still we have preserved. My gosh. Aha. That's because we have the same ID, I believe. So maybe we can, aha, orders. Okay, now it works as intended, but to preserve the pretty animation, so perhaps we can do this and just listen to click, just to preserve the pretty animation. Aha, it's just because. Well, actually, we do not need to send updates once either we toggle it, since we have the updates. So why don't we just listen to the updates whenever we add some new items? Okay, now it's pretty clear, but now we have the pretty animation on the checkbox. Okay, now I believe that should be okay. So in terms of RxJS, okay, there are plenty of operators. Maybe I can offer you uh, paying attention to the RxJS marbles. It has listing of the operators that could be used in RxJS. You can simply see how it will behave in terms of pushing some data. And then you could also refer to the RxJS documentation just to see the description of it. But here is the visual representation of what will happen in case if you will use one of these operators. To my mind, this is something that could help you a lot to start understanding RxJS operators. If I'm not mistaken, this also is left within the lectures, but still, one more time I will encounter you to use it. Great. Um, in terms of RxJS, okay, I believe we're also clear. Perhaps we can move forward. So, Unsplash. So, I was looking like for the examples of APIs that we can use for making the requests, since it's a more or less close topic to what we have accomplished right now. So what I want to do on Splash is the service that will return you either a particular image or it could return a random one. So that's if you remember from the regular momentum, whenever you access the welcome screen, you will see some different backgrounds. So why don't we use the same approach for creation of our clone? So that's why I decided to use Unsplash for such purposes. Uh, okay, so I already like registered for it. I have my apps right here with the case. We will use it in a moment. So now let's do a little of preparation. Obviously, we will require a service, and this one will be global. So then we will place it inside the core module, and then services, and I want to create the uh, random image service. For that, it would be great to create a model, but just not to spend the time. So I will too much time for creation of the models. I will like to do the following. So first, for sure, we need HTTP client module to start working with HTTP requests. If I'm not mistaken, it requires to be imported only once. And since we use core module for importing some infrastructural modules, so we can keep it here and it will be available everywhere. So now, since this service is created especially for making the HTTP request, so now we need to inject the HTTP client, and then we need one more method called getImage. So no input parameters here, and then in order to make the HTTP request, simply invoke this HTTP dot, and the request type we want. In our case, it will be get. And here, first we need URL, then here inside the options, we can use headers, params, which refer to query params, obviously, as the URL. Okay, so now let's refer random image API. So I've seen like the endpoint. Okay, so first of all, we need our authorization. So, okay, you can also pass this value using a client ID query parameter. Client ID equals your access key. Because in a way, pass your application access key via the HTTP authorization header. So we can use it in both ways. Either we pass it right here. That will be our authorization, or either we could pass it as a query parameter. Let's pass it as the header. Okay, so we need access key. Great. Well, not keep it safe just because it is used just for examples. Okay, we just put the authorization header here, and in return, we will need just the URL on the image. So this is our URL, and let's refer to the thing photos. We need a random photo. The endpoint called random. So we passed authorization header, and we want something that's relative to the landscape, just because we are making the clone of momentum. But we also want to pass some parameters. First of all, let's pass the first query parameter. It will be query. Then we need only landscape orientation because we want to make it as a background image. Count, okay. it should be enough. And in return, we will get something like this. We will need the link only to the image itself. So as we see from the response, it has URLs. Okay, just to put it simply, let's do the following URLs. We'll do the following, then it will return the observable with the URL, so that's why we want to transform it. I haven't imported this one, URLs, and row. I believe that should be enough. Okay, great. Now the tricky point here. Okay, we can include this as a app component logic. So the tricky point is whenever we just call this method, it actually will not make any request just because we need to subscribe to it. So remember, if you make the HTTP client request, don't forget to subscribe. By the way, a good point here. So the frequently asked question here. So do we need actually to unsubscribe once we got the response from the HTTP client? So if you remember, the observable could be completed at some moment of time. And this is the case. The HTTP client will be completed once you will obtain the response, right? So you will not need to unsubscribe it from here. So you'll just need to subscribe and gets the data we're trying to achieve. Okay, so now let's see. Okay, the request is successful. The payload, here we have URLs row. Okay, maybe let's take full. Okay, that should be enough. Let's maybe have. Okay, either we can have the property here, or again we can use async pipe. I guess we can do it in the same way, and in that case, we do not need any lifecycle hook here. So we will need the image overlay and okay. Students image async as image URL. So that's cool thing. We just created the local variable out of the value, and we can use it to pass it over. Right now, we can just check whether it's loading correctly. Seems like yes. Um, okay, maybe we can get the smaller image just to prevent such loadings. Maybe we can take the regular one. Okay, why not? Let it be. Now we need to make this image as the background, and because we are not able to pass any properties um, to the CSS, um, I'll just apply the properties object fits color. And perhaps we need also some sort of filter just to make everything white or opacity maybe. Maybe let's apply opacity better. It will be okay, why not? Um I'll just copy the styles to here. Then we also need to apply that index for these things. Let's see how it goes. Yeah, okay. Sounds pretty cool. And it really looks good, as for me. So, okay, now we got the random image from the Unsplash, make it as the background one, and now it looks pretty much better. The only improvement we can make here, and you've already noticed maybe, is that we have to pass the same authorization header each time to make the requests. And it could be done from several methods or even from several services. And it's quite common thing to pass the access tokens to each request you make to be authorized. So it's quite a common practice. Of course, you can store it somewhere to get it, but instead of doing each time, the coolest thing we can create interceptor inside our core module, and then we'll see that our interceptor has been created. The only thing we will need to do the HTTP interceptor in the provider section. By doing the following thing. Great. So we registered our interceptor. Then we need to pass this authentication header, this clone. Except we just want to pass this header right here without passing it each time. You could also like pass any things you want, including query params as well. but I just want like to show you how to do it. Okay, authorization does not exist on type HTTP headers. Great. Well, actually, well, let's refer to the doc. Maybe I can recall something. Okay, I just recall it. Request. We need to set this thing here. Let's copy one more time. Now it should be okay. Let's reformat one more time and see whether the request comes successful. It still generates the background for me. Let's see what we have in terms of the headers. We have request headers, and here we go. Here is our authorization. So we managed to pass the token for each request that comes through the HTTP client. The only thing I just wanted to show you as well is in case if you want to bypass this interceptor since we registered it, and whenever each time we will try to make the HTTP request, it will come through the interceptor. So in case if for some reason you need to bypass this interceptor, we can do the following thing. So let's assume I will just so the idea is pretty simple. I will just refer to this Stack Overflow. So actually you need the dependency called HTTP backend. And so how it will look like, it will still create this HTTP client for you, but instead, this HTTP client will not trigger the interceptor. It will behave as the regular HTTP client, but without any interceptor. I think that topic is quite interesting, so I will leave it also here. Okay, great. I believe we need to finalize for today since we're already right about 2 hours past. But I believe that for today we accomplished lots of things. So we implemented reactive form for our to-do list, as well as we implemented the subject with operator transformation. And we implemented the HTTP request for getting the random image, which makes our application more fancy and eye-catching to my mind. Okay, so we're right about to finish for today, and the last call for the questions. Please don't be afraid to ask if anything needs to be clarified. Well, Okay, I will wait for a couple of minutes in case if you're typing. But in case of not having questions, we'll write about it across our webinar. Looks like nobody's typing or unmuting. So yeah, believe everything is clear, but still, if you see that something is missed or you want to expand on some of the topics, um, so please let me know accordingly. You can DM me or pin me directly in the chat, so that I could pay attention to your request and we'll expand on whatever we covered today. Okay, then, so looks like we're right about to close the webinar. So thank you everybody for attention. I hope that 2 hours would be useful for you. So wish you a good weekend and a good rest of the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.